Uh, Welcome everyone to this presentation in honor of Interfaith Awareness Week. My name is Yusef Miller. I'm with the Interfaith Coalition for Earth Justice, and I'm here with my co-chair, Phil Petrie. And we are going to talk about our organization and make sure everyone knows the background, where we came from, what we do, and what we're interested in, and hopefully get you so tantalized by what you've heard that you're willing to take this back to your communities, to your youth groups, to your any special earth-friendly groups that you're aware of, and send them our way. You know, people are not too familiar with interfaith and earth justice and earth science coming together, but here we are. So I want to welcome everyone and thank you for showing up to our event today. And I'll also say for people who are newly arriving that we are recording. And if you don't want your face to be recorded into this meeting, you can turn off your camera if you feel more comfortable. So Phil, I guess we could start the
Okay.
Yeah, the presentation there.
Let me do that. Let me make it full here. Hang on, let me move this. Boom. Can I just ask, is there still a black bar where we have the share screen for people?
It's full. It's a full screen.
And there's no black bar?
No, I don't see a black
Perfect.
bar.
Excellent. Okay.
So again, this is our title page, Earth Justice Unites Faith Traditions. And it'll be Yusef Miller, myself, and Phil Petrie, my co-chair, the one who put this slide up for us. And we are co-chairs for the Interfaith Coalition for Earth Justice. Now I'm going to turn the presentation over to Phil.
All right, let me, hang on, it's like, okay, there we go. So what we're going to talk about, you know, actually, let me go back for a second. In our name, Interfaith Coalition for Justice is sort of all the pieces of this presentation. So we're going to start with Earth and talking a little bit kind of about the history of how we got in this situation with the environmental crisis as it is right now. And then we're going to talk about faiths and what they bring to the table, and interfaith as a kind of general concept as well. And lastly, we're going to talk about justice. And that's when we talk about what we specifically do, what the Interfaith Coalition for Earth Justice does. So Yusef and I will be sort of ping-ponging. I'll do this Earth section. He's going to do the faith section. Then we'll kind of split the justice section. So we'll do our best to get that right. And, you know, in terms of the story of kind of how we got to this position with the environmental crisis. And again, I say that, you know, it's not just the climate crisis. It's an environmental crisis. Almost every aspect of Earth's biosphere is being impacted. The climate crisis is probably the most extreme part of it and the most threatening part of it. And of course, you know, this is just a graph showing a shift in temperature that's happened from 1956-76 kind of baseline temperatures to 2011-21 baseline temperatures, and how they've increased in centigrade and in Fahrenheit. And if you look up at the top, you see that the North Pole is the most impacted area, which is, I'm not a climate scientist, so I can't explain that. I would like to do a little more reading on that, but it's fascinating. You know, this, and we may not even know exactly why that's happened. But again, one of the reasons I focus on temperature is because we have had such an extreme summer of record-breaking temperatures all over the country, but especially in certain cities like Phoenix, right? And day after day of 100+ temperatures. I think that is a real kind of warning shot for a lot of people. I think people are kind of getting the picture that, man, something different is happening here. So how do we get to this position of these extreme temperatures in terms of climate? And I'll talk about some of the other, aspects of the environmental crisis. But the fossil fuels, this is just a graph to show you how the fossil fuels came into being. They are mostly plant matter that about 500 million years ago fell into rivers and oceans and lakes and descended to the bottom. And then over time, over that 500 million years, there's all sorts of other detritus that gets on top, rock and so forth. Things begin to become, sedimentary rock is created, as you can see there. And this enormous pressure creates natural gas, oil, and coal, the fossil fuels. So they are, in fact, in a sense, fossils, right? And I think one of the key things we have to figure here is these things took this 500 million years to make. So we don't have another 500 million years to wait for the next crop to come in, right? This is a limited resource. Human beings have been using fossil fuels for quite a while, actually. About 3,500 years ago, there's some archaeological evidence for using in bronze casting in China using coal. I don't know that's the first use. We don't know. That's maybe around the first record. Again, on the internet, there's stuff about cavemen using coal, but I wasn't able to get to the bottom of that, so I didn't want to put that in place. But anyway, we know it at least goes back this far, and this is using it for its heating properties. It's very, and this would be coal that was basically very much just at the surface. You could just find it. Interestingly enough, you could find it a lot on the surface in China. So that's one of the reasons it begins in China. You can find it a lot on the surface in England, in Britain. And so that's probably another reason that we have the Industrial Revolution. We're jumping way ahead from 1500 BCE to 1712 Christian era in Britain and the Industrial Revolution, because the use of fossil fuels previous to the Industrial Revolution is a drop in the bucket. It's not having a great impact. It may pollute rivers and stuff here and there, but it's not altering the climate in any way, shape, or form. But as soon as the English learn how to harness coal with the steam engine, then we're in a totally different situation. And all of the fossil fuels begin to be used, begin to be mined much more heavily. Of course, the machinery becomes more and more complex, starting with trains and then moving into automobiles and airplanes and all of the various turbines and stuff that basically create all the energy that we use, or most of the energy we use, apart from renewables, solar and wind. And it's that harnessing of fossil fuels that creates modern civilization in the West. However, there's a downside, right, to this, as we're now finding out. The greenhouse effect. When you burn the fossil fuels, you release CO2 into the atmosphere. And a lot of that CO2 becomes a kind of blanket that traps a lot of the sun's heat. That's what this diagram on the left is kind of showing us. Some of the sun's heat does go back into space. That's the yellow arrow bouncing off. But some of it is trapped by our atmosphere, by the CO2 in the atmosphere and other greenhouse gases, and then begins to heat up the entire planet. Again, another site online talked about that we've essentially used in 300 years about half of the fossil fuels that exist. I don't think we really know that for sure, because we don't know how much fossil fuels are down there. I think we're getting better and better at finding it and unfortunately, and extracting it, but we still don't really know what's there. We might have used quite a bit more than half of the fossil fuels. And of course, we call them non-renewable because we have no way to replenish these things. Now, another piece of this environmental crisis that we have to look at is population. And this is a graph sort of showing human population growth going back 10,000 BCE. So quite a ways back. Forget if that places us at the first ice age. I think or the last ice age. I think that's a little bit further on back. But anyway, you can see that most of the history of Homo sapiens has been fairly flatlined. And then kind of around zero, you begin to have this growth into the Middle Ages. You have some real growth. And then basically it's the Industrial Revolution that really kicks in, and medical technology, our medical science improving, and human population grows exponentially. So it takes until 1804 approximately, again, these are guesstimates, to reach 1 billion of human population. We're now at 8 billion. And that number, the doubling, keeps sort of increasing. What's interestingly is right now, the growth rate is slowing, but there's still so many of us that we can continue to increase. I think it's projected by the end of this century, or maybe it's much sooner than that, I'm sorry, around 10 billion. Anyway, let's move on. The other big piece here to the environmental crisis is consumerism. So human population is something that's been happening, around the globe, especially where medical technologies were improved and all the kind of life-enhancing measures that we might have. I wanted to add another piece to that. Sorry, I'm a little scattered, but I think the truth is, whenever any species, probably this is true universe-wide, I'm going to go out on a limb, but whenever any species increases the way we have, that species is going to push other species to the side, right? It's going to invade other ecosystems and so forth that other species rely on to thrive. It's just partly a kind of reality, I think, of use of the environment, land mass, and so forth and so on. So anyway, that's a piece about population. But the other huge piece here, and probably just as important, if not more important than population, is consumerism. And that's a Western development, right? Again, with the Industrial Revolution, we can make all of these products suddenly that we couldn't really make before, that we didn't always have to use for. There were new inventions constantly to make life, quote unquote, easier, and often, frankly, did make life easier. I do like a dishwasher, I have to admit. When I have to wash dishes by hand, I grumble. But anyway, but what happened with Western consumerism, and I think as most of us know from the West, is it became its own kind of steamroller, right? You get into this whole thing of planned obsolescence and of new models, so that, if people are buying an automobile in 1953, you're now trying to sell 1957, you're trying to now sell them another automobile. You have to get the new Chevy with the big fins on it. There are all these things to kind of get people excited about buying more stuff. And where does that stuff come from? Well, it comes from all the natural resources on the planet. It's all of these animal and plant resources and mineral resources that we use to create all these products, including, of course, computers, all those the rare earth minerals that go into computer. Some of those resources, like wood, are renewable, so they will grow back given enough time. But some of them, like the minerals, are not renewable. So there's a limited sort of phase here. I do want to say one last piece before I turn this over. I think the next slide is Yusef's. So this is one of those typical kind of early 60s illustrations. I remember books like this. I didn't have this one. You see the 39 cents in the corner. This is some cover. But I remember that style of illustration. This expansion of consumerism starts in the 19th century, probably, right? But it really expands just in my lifetime. I was born in 1958, and I've seen this enormous increase in the size of stores and the amount of stuff people would buy, and how quickly people would get rid of things to get the new things as well. These entertainment franchises. When I was a kid, yeah, there were Superman movies on, or Superman things on TV. It wasn't this huge Marvel or DC Comics franchise. So everything has gotten expanded enormously just in my lifetime. If that can happen, we can move this back. It's maybe easier to build it up, but we can move backwards with a lot of this and return to some of the things that we did before. For instance, like my father would do, wearing a sweater with a hole in it. He saw no shame in that. He's a depression kid. You wear a sweater until it's virtually falling apart. Why not? So anyway, all right, I will turn it over. Oh, I did want to touch on these. So sorry, this is still my slide. So with these three kind of key things, the technological revolution, population growth, and consumerism, we have this enormous human impact on our biosphere. And that's leading to those things that I'm afraid we're probably all kind of aware of: the overfishing of the oceans, the acidification, which is the CO2 being absorbed, the elimination of ecosystems, the extinction of animal and plant species. Again, we are in the sixth major extinction. And as far as I know, the only major extinction event driven by one species. And then, of course, climate change as well. Oh, yeah. I don't even know the slides I put together here. All right. So we've got this one, just a little bit of levity about this situation. Levity, but of course, it's also very, very serious. The choice is ours. You know, we are at this enormous threshold of we can really begin to rein this in, to shift from fossil fuels to renewables, to change our consumerist patterns, because I honestly think we're going to have to do both. I don't think we can simply do it by switching to renewables. The style of life we have in the West is not sustainable for the rest of the globe, and there's a fundamental fairness issue there. So we can either do all that and move to a livable Earth, or we can continue with business as usual and get into that hell knows scenario, right? I like the little girl pointing to the livable Earth, Dad, livable Earth. All right.
Thank you, Phil, for that presentation. And I like the lightheartedness at the end of it, because it is some really drastic information that we're hearing, and it's a suicidal path that we're on. So sometimes we need to smile at the end of hearing all that. So we are here as an Interfaith Coalition group. This is Interfaith Awareness Week, and we are the Interfaith Coalition of Earth Justice. And we realize that all of these problems, as Phil would say, is, and I love this quote from Phil that Phil uses, that we're taking all of these things, and it is an absence of true spirituality in this world, and we're trying to fill and replace that spirituality with things, with stuff, with items that we can buy. So we're trying to fill this God-sized hole in our life with material goods. This God-sized hole in relationship, with connection to the environment, to connection with one another, with connection with the plants and the animals. We're trying to fill that void with stuff. And here's where we're falling into a problem. If we would come back, just come back to our center. A lot of faiths in our traditions, we all have a tradition that seeks climate justice and puts it in the hands of human beings to be the stewards of the earth, the waters, the soils, the animals. Most traditions, you won't find any traditions that I've ever heard of that will say, hey, go out and destroy the environment. I haven't seen one, and I doubt if I would ever see a tradition that is pro destroying the environment. It is a suicidal path. It is something that we cannot sustain, and it doesn't make any sense, because not only will our neighbors, when I mean neighbors, I mean plants, I mean fish, I mean animals and insects, our neighbors will suffer while we do this suicidal plan, but eventually it will come from us. So, it will come for us, and we will suffer as well, as we're doing now. A lot of people, you might have heard on the news today, the storms, the terrible storms on the East Coast that just ravaged the East Coast, and hurricane, there were tornadoes and all kinds of things that happened on the East Coast, and flights shut down way here on the West Coast. So we're all connected. And as members of different faiths, we have this reality. We have this stewardship, this responsibility, and that is a responsibility we're trying to share and clarify with every faith tradition that is here. Our faith tradition demands it from us if we would only search and put it into action in our lives. And that way to action is some of the projects that we have in ICEJ, to not only speak and say flowery words about the impact of earth justice on this planet, but actually give solutions and practical applications that we can put to work, and practical projects that we can put to work. So we all have an investment in this, whether you're churched or unchurched. We all have an investment in this. But if you're churched, you also, in your tradition, believe it or not, have a responsibility to take care of this earth. Next slide, please. For example, in Judaism, goodness of creation, and I'll read. It's Genesis 1:24-25. And God said, let the earth bring forth living creatures according to their kind, cattle and creeping things, and beasts of the earth according to their kinds. And it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth according to their kind, and the cattle according to their kind, and everything that creeps upon the ground according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. Every animal, every creature, everything, the ground itself, everything, when he created it, he saw that it was good. And we should see the goodness, and we should work to the goodness. And that is our lesson, one of the many lessons that we get from Judaism. Next slide, please. In Buddhism, interdependence. And you can see this wonderful art piece that shows the connection of everyone on an entire planet. And I like to look at this circle and see one hemisphere, and on the opposite side of the circle, any hemisphere in your mind, and you can see that we're still all connected. We have the same air, we have the same water. The water is ancient. It has been here since long before us. We don't continue to get more water from other planets. We have this water, and we have to take care of it. So in our Buddhism tradition, they say, and I'll read, when we realize that the world is a mutual, interdependent, cooperative enterprise, then we can build a noble environment. If our lives are not based on this truth, then we shall perish. That suicidal path that we're on, industrial wise and otherwise, not only the industries, but we in our independent actions are also contributing to our own demise. So this is from a Thai monk, and I will not try to say the name, but we thank the Thai monk for this slide. Next slide, please. In Islam, my tradition, my personal tradition, it says in the Quran, our holy book, O children of Adam. So it's talking to all of us, each single one of us that live on this planet, every human being. Eat, drink, but waste not by excess. For Allah loveth not the waster. And we waste our water. We waste our food. We waste products. We waste so many things, and those things end up in landfills. They end up in the ocean, the plastics that the animals in the sea are eating, and even the animals in the ground, they're eating and getting trapped in. And this wastefulness is part of what's destroying this planet. And even when we, as Phil spoke about before, when we consume these fossil fuels, the waste product of that, we're also the wasters. The waste products of that causing greenhouse gases, polluting our air and our water, and affecting our warmth from the sun. It also says in Islam that it calls all human beings, starting with Adam and Eve, the Khalifa, or some people know the word as Caliph, which is a ruler or a caretaker. And that is a steward. And it's important in Islam because this is our resources are scarce, particularly in the Middle East. And you can see from this image how everything is precious, especially water in the Middle East. And you waste not water, because it could be the end of your life. Muslims have to wash before they pray 5 times a day. But if you're in the middle of the desert and you don't have enough water to drink, you have to do something else. A lot in the religion, it allows us to do dry washing, which means take up some sand and rub it across your hands and wipe your head with it right quick, and that's fine. So even our practices say, look, take care of your water. Do not waste any water. Next slide, please. In Hinduism, and as you can see Mahatma Gandhi there, living simply. Living simply is a very undervalued type of aspect for human beings. We live in a multiple world size right now, meaning we use so much space that we could use multiple Earths just to contain us. We need to live in a one Earth size environment, but we want the big 10-room house with 5 bathrooms and things like this, and that's our like ultimate goal for a lot of people. But when one room could suffice or 2 rooms could suffice for a single couple if they had no children. In Mahatma Gandhi's statement, he says, happiness, the goal to which all are striving, is reached by endeavoring to make the lives of others happy. And if by renouncing the luxuries of our lives, we can lighten the burden of others, surely simplification of our wants is a thing greatly to be desired. Now, I want to put that in a real time, current day issue. If we were to live smaller, we would have more room for housing in San Diego County. We will be able to build more affordable, smaller, more efficient housing if we would have shrunken our footprint, but we don't. And if we would live simply, we would be able to do that for our brothers and sisters who are challenged with homelessness. Next slide, please. Christianity, service in humility, from John 13, verses 2 through 5. And during supper, Jesus got up from the table, took off his outer robe, and tied a towel around himself. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with a towel. That towel that was tied around him, the towel that was tied around him. So this is service to humanity. Even Jesus Christ in the Christian tradition, who everyone holds in his high regard, where he should be, he came down to the size and the humbleness of the average person to wash their feet, no less. Our feet. And you can think about our feet back in those days when people are walking around, their feet are in sandals, they're out there and they have all the environment on their feet. And everywhere else, you can at least keep above the dust and above the soil, but feet were a real challenge. But Jesus Christ went down there, washed the feet, and served humbly our fellow brethren. What lesson is that for us, that we could take this environmental approach and make it so that equity reigns true, that we are looking out for our indigenous brothers and sisters. We're looking out for people who are in lower income situations, who have a different environmental, micro environmental challenge, where this environmental justice work is also a work of service and humility to serve the less fortunate. Next slide, please. Our Native Americans, I spoke about before, the reverence for their places. In most indigenous communities around the world, they have a approach to life, an approach to their environment that is really sacred. Many Native American tribes have sacred sites which figure prominently in their religious traditions and history. These sites were often meeting places between human beings and the divine. And you can see this mountain. This mountain is a divine site and a place of prayer and worship for our indigenous brothers and sisters. And as you can extend, and we can understand, even in our Jewish tradition, our Christian tradition, our Islamic tradition, our Hindu tradition, our Buddhist tradition, where a lot of our great figures went to mountains to receive revelation. They were in wilderness when they received revelations. They were in deserts when they received revelation. So all of this environment, this whole planet is a masjid. This whole planet is a church. This whole planet is a synagogue. This whole planet is a temple. It is the environment and the pews, if you will, of the Creator. Brick and mortar, when we're tied into brick and mortar and we don't appreciate the outdoors, the sky above our heads, the clouds, the environment around us, we lose touch with our responsibility. Our indigenous brothers and sisters have kept this tradition alive in this country and many countries around the world where you see indigenous peoples who are tied to their environment and struggling against us, the quote unquote civilized. But I submit to you, brothers and sisters and family and siblings on this call here, on this Zoom presentation, that a flushing toilet and Wi-Fi does not make one civilized. What makes us civilized is acting civil to one another and civil to the planet. So we have great lessons to learn from people who live simply, people who live basically, and people who are in touch with our environment. Next slide, please. Justice and action. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll take these next couple and then is that cool?
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, we need, not only, of course, actually, let me back up. Let me just look at that definition of justice to start with. The quality of being fair, and this is taken from the internet, but the quality of being fair and just, moral soundness, and conformity to truth. And, so there needs to be an awareness of what justice is. There needs to be a pursuit of justice. But finally, of course, justice must lead us to action. I think that second bullet point, we needed to flesh that out. I think I left that hanging. Sorry about that. But earth justice, I want to focus on the fact that earth justice means justice for all the beings on the earth. And so that includes all the animals, like the polar bears at the North Pole and so forth. But it also, of course, includes all of us. It's not an either or situation. I think sometimes environmentalists can be accused of caring more about, a forest and preserving a forest or the polar bears or whatever it might be, the tree frog, than people in the inner city who are struggling just to live. And there may be some people like that, but that's not the way we approach earth justice. Earth justice has to be for everything upon the earth. Likewise, it should not only be human justice, right? We do have to think about the animals and plants that we share this planet with. They have rights too. They are part of, I would say, as a Christian, part of God's plan. They are, in fact, one of the ways that we see what God truly is through all the other created beings. So all of this needs to be included. That means we do have to include human justice, racial justice, economic justice. It's all part of a vision of where we might go. And I would also say that this crisis that we're in, every crisis is an enormous opportunity as well, right? Every crises may seem like terrible things just to kind of get through, but they're also a time to rethink something that probably got you to that crisis in the first place, and try to, if it's just a personal crisis, try to become somehow a better human being by rising to the challenge that this crisis faces you with. In this case, it's a global challenge. It's a civilizations wide challenge that all of us have to face together. And maybe that's part of the lesson of this crisis as well. We cannot fix this by ourselves. We have to fix this together as a species. And we have to really begin to act better together. We've made some strides that way, but we're still a ways to be done.
Bill.
Yes.
Yes. You mind if I jump into the equity model right quick?
Not at all. Not at all.
So then providing justice in an equity model, what I wanted to say about that is that the equity model is seeing that people of different environments have different needs. For example, people of African-American and Latinx communities, they have a really huge problem with particulate matter, with trucks and living by highways. And it's different from someone who lives in La Jolla or someone who lives in Encinitas. In that micro environment, they need equity to get what they need when it comes to air pollution versus someone in their air at the beach. Also, when we look at the heat index in communities of concern, we find that there are less green grass and less shade-bearing trees and less waterways that absorb heat. So their heat index is higher, and they have to use more power, AC and electricity to stay cool, which is basically forcing them to use dirty energy. So looking at these two different microenvironments, we can see that there's a disparity, and equity helps to remove that disparity between them. And then so that is that. And then one person in the chat mentioned for when we had the interfaith talks that we had from different traditions, they says that Prophet Zarathustra is supposed to have lived 5,000 years before the poetic composition of his teachings likely survived. That wasn't the part, sorry. In the religion, the prophet Zarathustra, called Zoroaster by the Greek philosopher like Plato, we call God Ahura Mazda, or wise creator, and we have prayers of praise for all God's creation, for the functions all perform. So I just want to read that from the Zarathustra's and make sure that they're included, since that was brought up by one of our writers. Back to you, Phil.
Sure. Thank you, Yusef. Okay. So just a little bit about us, ICEJ, and what we do. This was our founding event back in 2015, Answering Earth's Call. And it was actually held at St. Paul's Cathedral, which is one of my churches. I go to two Episcopal churches, but I was actually not involved in planning this at all. But it was a big event, as you can see. 350 was very involved. There were a number of different organizations. Yusef, if you know some of the orgs, you could help me out with this. But it was a well-attended event. It had good speakers and it had good musical events. And one of the things that was hoped for coming out of this was that there would be some group started who would address environmental justice, earth justice. It took 2 years. So one of the things here is patience, right? The things don't always happen quite the way you want them to unfold. I think maybe there was a meeting, but it didn't quite come off. And then 350 had an interfaith team, and myself and a number of folks were on that interfaith team. And part of our kind of walking papers were to make sure this group did happen, that it did get off the ground. And so, Beth was a huge part of that. Yusef was a part of that very, very early on, and we got it going. Let's look at the next slide. And our mantra is to educate, equip, and mobilize. So we're going to use those three: educate, equip, and mobilize as kind of framing devices for what we do. Educate, equip, and mobilize faith communities to take action on earth justice issues. And so part of the education piece is we have this Advancing Earth Justice speaker series. And you can see the four that we've had so far. They kind of range from things that are somewhat scientific, like the one on industrial farming and pandemic risk, to much more spiritual. Buddhist Larry Ward there, Be Not Afraid, that we had last fall. And we most recently had one with this Michael Richardson on investing in our values. So there's a lot of different pieces, of course, to earth justice, a lot of different things that you can talk to and speak on and try to encourage people to move forward with. And we like to sort of look at the big picture. We've batted back and forth. Should we be a kind of one issue group, just this? We tend to feel that our issues are justice, and that means there's a lot of different pieces to it. And then all the interfaith stuff, of course, as well. If I can just say one last piece about that interfaith and faith part. I believe deeply that the way we can truly act in terms of earth justice is by connecting with our faith traditions. It's not that those are off to the side. Those should be at the very center of all of this for those of us who are people of faith. when I gave this presentation to the Buddhists about 2 weeks ago, I said, if you were to ask me, what's the most important thing I can do for, earth justice for the planet, I might say become a better Buddhist. And you know what that probably means. We probably all know what is the next step that we need to take in our own faith. So, all right, to equip. And that connects with this, actually. It's one of the reasons we have these interfaith services, because interfaith services, and we've held now 2 of them, one last fall and one last spring. This was the one last spring in Balboa Park. But what they do is they, again, enable us to connect with the richness of our different traditions, because they're truly interfaith services. So we really try to have aspects that are Christian, Jewish, Buddhist, Muslim, indigenous. Haven't always done as good a job on the Hindu. We need a Hindu representative. But anyway, or new thought as well. Absolutely. All these different pieces. And I realize there's a lot more than just that. But bring those in a sense to the table, have those as part of these services. And then we hopefully our hearts are kindled and we're moved to act on justice. We've also had a whole bunch of workshops. Beth Johnson did a lot of cultivating resilience workshops on the work of Joanna Macy. So, basically dealing with climate trauma and the climate crisis, the sense of overwhelmingness that can have. Again, there's ways to connect with resources to get us through this. And we're going to need that more and more as we get deeper and deeper into the climate crisis. And we also have a BIPOC outreach program. That's another kind of equipped thing that's very specific. It really has 2 key parts. The ICEJ part is to get out into these BIPOC communities, mostly in kind of southern San Diego, reach out to those faith communities and see what are the issues of concern to them. And we've been doing this for about a year. So we've done emailings, phone calls, and then actually going out in person and trying to find, and we've had a number of meetings as well, from the emails and the phone calls and going out in person to talk with people. It can be a little slow. It's a slow kind of moving train here, but it's important work. What are the eco-justice issues of concern to those people, to those communities? We didn't want to come in and say, hey, you should be concerned with climate. I'm deeply concerned with climate, but I realize there's a lot of issues, sometimes more pertinent issues right up front that people are dealing with in day-to-day life. So we're trying to do that and then see what resources we can connect them with, whether we can work with some of the electeds on certain policy issues and so forth. We will, the BIPOC program is continuing. We also work on this with Grid Alternatives. They are a not-for-profit who works with the state of California to put free solar installations on the homes of qualifying homeowners. That's one of the things they do. They're also trying to do a program now of selling your old gas burner car, your fossil fuel burning car in for a certain rebate, and then getting an EV and trying to help communities that are frontline communities to do that, because can be a big ask. That can be expensive. That can be out of reach of a lot of people. So if there's extra money coming in there, that's positive. Their Grid is really just getting that going. I forget what the group is that they're allied with for some of the funding on that one. And we like to partner with other organizations. That always increases our bandwidth and makes us stronger. And this, I'm going to turn it over to Yusef.
Thank you, Phil. Mobilize, mobilize, mobilize. When we go out to, for example, we're in front of Chase Bank here, as you can see, and you may say, what does Chase Bank have to do with environmental justice? Well, a lot of these big corporations, whether banks and other industries, they are heavily invested in fossil fuels. And it's by choice. It's by choice that they are contributing to our situation here. So we say, as individuals, what can you do as an individual? You can go and you can say, look, Chase Bank, I've been banking with you for a long time. And if you don't change your position on fossil fuels, you're going to lose my business. There are other banks. There are other banks out there. And if enough of us do that, to the Chase Banks of the world, to the big corporations of the world, then it hits them in the place where they hate the most, their purse. Hits them in the purse, and they are like, look, we have to do something. So you see people in this photo from all walks of life coming together to say to Chase Bank, you need to divest from fossil fuels. And some companies you would never figure deal with fossil fuels and support fossil fuels, but they do. As a matter of fact, even some of our elected officials are heavily invested in fossil fuels. We need to go to SDG&E, who uses dirty fuel, and say, look, I know that we have no other choice but SDG&E for our electricity unless you have solar. So we ask and demand that SDG&E invest in solar options. We make sure that they invest in dropping the cost of solar panels and getting and not investing in options that block solar acquisition by people who can afford it. Now, people who do not have homes, you might say, okay, that's sort of a elitist approach. Well, people don't have homes, then they live in apartments or whatever. They can't get solar on their roofs. It's just not practical. But SDG&E can lower the costs of their fuel, their energy. People in low income communities, they pay a larger portion of their income to energy, and it's to dirty energy. So we pay the highest energy rate in the entire U.S. CONUS U.S. in the continental U.S. Only Hawaii pays more than us in energy costs. Why is that so? That should not be so here. So we're asking SDG&E, since we have no other options, that you need to treat people with equity, so that we're not, if we cannot afford the rooftop solar, to lower the cost of energy. And when you see that we mobilizing is very important, because when people say, okay, I agree with you. I agree, Phil, with the equip, and I agree, you guys, with the interfaith, and I agree with all those things you're talking about, but what can I do? This is where mobilize comes in. We have to give someone something to obtain, something to actually participate in. And this kind of rally is one of them. We've done this many times. We've even went to the Board of Supervisors and did a whole press rally there. And we had youth there. We had a production, like a show that we put on there with some entertainers, and we took a petition up to the Board of Supervisors and asked them to look into issues dealing with climate justice in our county. And we did it from the county because it affects every part of San Diego. So we went up to the county and we dropped off this letter and demanding that they look into some of these alternatives, and especially alternatives to dirty fuel, which is electrification. So these are the things that we offer for people to get involved with. We offer for people to come to that photo that we showed before, where we had the outdoor, and we were talking about the cathedral of God, the cathedral, the mosque of God, the outdoors. We were at this wonderful tree, and we're talking about great events and of different faiths are speaking, but we're coming together, having something to do to make a change. We're going to the beaches and saying that the beaches should be clean and free from plastics. We're saying that the air quality, electric buses, why are buses just spewing out all of this toxic air when they could be electrified and taking around people around the community? So there are options and there are ways for us to actually participate in this fight. And not only that, we next slide, please. Not only that, we have petitions and bills and legislation that we try to push forward. For example, Let's Go San Diego. We're trying to make more transit for people, that they don't have to use their own vehicles to drive to work, back to home and to work, and drive from here to there, that you can jump on a transit and and have cleaner air, less impact on the environment by increasing the transit and where it reaches from where people live to where people work. And we expect that the employers should be absolutely supporting these kinds of bills. But we're just starting with Let's Go San Diego and ICEJ. Our investment into Let's Go San Diego, so many people are involved. You have the unions involved, you have the nurses involved, you have all kinds of organizations involved, SD 350. But what is ICEJ's part of this Let's Go San Diego, building more transit? What we're doing is we're coming to faith centers and asking, tabling, educating, and asking people to sign petitions to get this ball rolling to increase transit throughout our county. This is ICEJ. We're having our hands in the work to make sure that we are connecting the faith communities to the legislations that actually impact them and our whole environment. So when you see that we're looking for infrastructure safety upgrades, we're looking for rapid routes for job centers and communities, trolley line extensions, rail connections, and others, to cut air pollution at 20%. It's not enough to say and enjoy those things in our heart. We have to come out of the brick and mortar and support these initiatives. And we also bring the initiative to you. We bring the initiative to everyone and table unintrusively, table after services so that people can be educated if they want to be educated and sign up and say that they agree and we enjoy the work that has been being done by ICEJ and others. Next slide, please. What can we do as individuals? Is this mine, Phil? What can we do as individuals? We can communicate. People really don't know. When they say earth justice, they be like, oh man, that's such a political topic. It's such a hot topic. I don't want to talk about it. But really, it's actually not. It's been politicized, but it's actually something that is universal and it's everyone's concern. So we need to talk to our friends, to educate them, as Phil said earlier. We have to educate people on what's going on and how you can participate to make changes. We have to be able to, in our own lives, turn off lights, and we have to be able to do the little pieces of change that we can make on our own, and they add up. When you have thousands of people, then tens of thousands, then millions doing, hundreds of thousands, then millions doing it, then it really makes an impact. But it starts with us. Be careful with our thermostat and our lightings, and make sure that our home is insulated so that we're not wasting energy. We got to crank up the heat even higher, but it's slipping out of the windows and cracks and under doors. So we're not contributing to decreasing our impact. We're actually using more fossil fuels. The foods we eat, and actually planting greens as well, green foods and gardens. This also has a huge impact on our air quality and our life, our body, and our well-being as much. The taking other options besides combustible fuel, cars, ride bikes, take transits, which we're trying to increase. You know, some people may say, well, there's no transit. Well, there's no transit going to places. Please sign the Let's Go San Diego. It's exactly what you're talking about, and it's exactly what we're trying to do. Try to carpool as much as possible. That decreases the number of cars that are going. And if you can drive to Arizona instead of fly, please do. I mean, try to fly less. You know, these huge engines compared to a car engine, you know, if we would fly less, it would be far greater. You know, trains have kind of gone out of style for some people, but you know, we need to find alternatives to these really community and air polluting transit ways. And we have so many other things that we can do as individuals. And rooftop solar, we spoke about, and solar hot water heaters. I've seen friends who've actually had the ability to do them, and they're so happy. They're cutting costs in power, and they actually contributing to the decrease of this impact in the world. And you can see the others that we have here. Next slide, please. What can we do in our community congregations? And this is what we've spoke about as well, not only as individuals, but we need to encourage our congregations in our community. Some of us are leaders in congregations and leaders in the community. And when they see us doing the right thing, they want to follow us. So we need to look at our use, and we need to work as a community to make a difference. And those words coming from some of us that reach hundreds of people when we speak, we need to use those words wisely. We can get people to rallies and cleanups at the beach and cleanups at the park. We can get these things going from the power we have in the people in this room. You have a lot of power and a lot of influence, and we can talk to our communities and get them on board, because honestly, they're not educated or equipped to mobilize. And that's why we have this process where we do this in ICEJ. You know, and if you haven't already started a creation care group or anything like that, a green team or any group, please start one and connect with us, ICEJ, because we will have something for you to do. I guarantee you, we will have something for you to do. We have open slots for ideas that we have, and we're saying, do we have the capacity to do those great ideas? Do we have enough people to execute these great ideas? We have the people, they're just not engaged. So we need your help to engage our communities. They just don't know we exist, maybe. And they see this video and they say, this is what I've been looking for. I wanted to combine my earth justice passions with my faith tradition and other people who think the same. And here we are, ICEJ, waiting with open arms for them, and especially the youth. The youth, they're already on point. Actually, we're trying to catch up with the youth. The youth got it all covered. They just need something to do, somewhere to do it, where people who are older, who have experience, people have connections, to put them in a situation where they can contribute. They don't have to be 18 years old actually to contribute. We tell people all the time, we can have in your youth group a writing campaign to mayors. You don't have to be 18 to write to your mayor. You don't have to be 18 to write to your community. And we can host those kinds of activities and tell your youth what they're writing about, what bills are out there that they could support, and the communities as well. So send them our way, come our way. We have open arms and many seats in our pews for all of you of many different backgrounds and many different faiths. We all have this in our culture. Next slide, please. And this is how you can contact us. My email is there, Phil's email is there, and there's a website. I think Phil wanted to talk about that website. Did you want to talk about that, Phil?
I can just mention, yeah, this QR code would take you to our signing up for our newsletter page. So we put out an e-newsletter about 5 times a year, maybe a little bit more. And then there's e-blasts that go out about particular events. So we would love to have you sign up on that. And I think there's if I remember correctly, I should know this, but on the sign up sheet, I think a sign up page, I think you can also say if you want to come to meetings or if you want to come to some of our events. But also if that isn't there, just contact us directly. And we will, as Yusef says, welcome you with open arms. We all need to be involved in this huge crisis. You know, there's a wonderful quote by, oh gosh, it's Alvin Toffler. No, it's not him. Anyway, Marshall McLuhan, that's who it was, who said, you know, on planet Earth, there are no passengers. We're all crew. We all have to pitch in. So I think that's absolutely right. So I think at this point, we are finished with the presentation part, and we're ready to take any questions that you might have or comments. I think, Yusef, we said it would be just as easy for people to just do it. You know, just raise your hand on the screen and I can stop share. Go.
Oh, there's everyone. Again, another welcome to everyone, and thank you for showing up to this presentation, and hopefully it has inspired you in some way, or made it so that you're already on the same page and you found some allies. So you could just either raise your hand, or you could just unmute and just ask your question, if you have a question. I'm sure Phil did such a great job that he answered all your questions, I'm sure, because this is kind of guy Phil is. He can answer all your questions in a single sitting.
Yeah.
Someone had a question? There you go, Michelle.
I just have a question about how you connected with each other, and how can you share a little bit on your realization that all faiths have these similar concerns? Because for me, that's a very untraditional way of looking at things, seeing what we have in common rather than our differences. Would you like to comment on that?
Yusef,
Would you like
want
to
to start?
Okay,
Or?
great. Yes, I'll start. Yeah, when we come together for any interfaith discussion, people generally reach back to their tradition to say what they feel about a particular issue. And when we talked about earth justice, everyone had something to contribute. When we brought people from every walk of life, there was not a single person that didn't have something to contribute. And they would give us references from their holy scriptures. And we would collect those and put them together and look at those and say, wow, we all have something that tells us to be good stewards. And we've seen none that said, actually, we don't even have a thought on it. Not even one that didn't say, well, our tradition doesn't even have a position. So when we collected those and we saw the universality of earth stewardship and earth justice, we just capitalized on that and brought people together, and we're all speaking the same language, no matter what tradition we came from. So that's what I'll offer to how we came together, and the idea that we all had the same tradition is we're absolutely not forcing that idea on traditions. Those traditions expose that idea to us because we came into community and we came into relationship.
Yeah, and if I can maybe just add to that, I think, so we started really in terms of coming together for first meetings in 2017, and that was a group of people that mostly kind of knew each other. I think, again, one of the key things you do there is, 5 people. Can you bring 2 of those people or all 5 of them to the meeting? That kind of thing. You kind of try to grow that way. Everybody has their own kind of networks and connections. But we keep trying to grow as much as we can. Yusef has done a really good job of talking about that. We would love to have you all at our next meeting, but it can be tough. It's generally at our meetings we have about 10 people, 8 to 10 people, and that's kind of the core of our group, really. But you can do quite a bit with 8 or 10 people. You really can. And there's a lot of other people then that those 8 or 10 people that are connected to, plus you're reaching out. And I just want to say one last thing about the interfaith piece. Again, I think interfaith dialogue is, to me, one of the glories of our age. It really is. There are so many things about this period that are problematic, from our politics to climate change to maybe kids having too much screen time, blah, blah, blah. But this interfaith dialogue that we actually have now around the world is a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful thing. And I would say it isn't just about finding the common ground. It's about learning from each other about the differences. The way I look at the divine is it's too big for any one religion to have a monopoly on it. It just is. God is way too big for that. So all of these religions are going to give us this really interesting perspectives on, to me, essentially what God is. And we only get that by being in dialogue with each other. So
I have a question.
Yeah, Diana.
Hi, I'm just wondering, when are your meetings and where are they? Are they online or in person?
Well, I can maybe take this first, and then Yusef, you want to jump in. So they're the second Tuesday of the month
Okay.
from 3 to 4:30,
Okay.
and they're on Zoom right now.
Okay,
So, they are very open to anybody that wants to join us on Zoom. We just had one today at 3.
oh,
We were talking, so we won't meet again till that second Tuesday in September, but we were talking about getting together in person. And so Yusef was proposed, let's do it quarterly. So hopefully we will definitely be getting together in person quarterly, but Zoom does make it a lot easier as well. You miss a lot in terms of in-person contact, but it's convenient. It doesn't use fossil fuels in the same way either.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. It is Zoom is a earth-friendly way of getting together, but we do miss human contact. We miss smiles and hugs, and we miss those kind of things. So a quarterly meeting to make sure that we come together and feel that human warmth is the idea that's proposed. But our very next meeting after the one today will also be on Zoom, so you could attend that. And we realize that, I see people's faces on here from Poway and from other places. I'm in Escondido, and some people are different places. And when you're spread across a county like that, it's more efficient and easier for people to do Zoom. If we all were in Escondido, where I am, it would be nothing for us to come all together in one time and say, hey, don't do Zoom. Let's just come together monthly at the church up the street or something. But we're across the county. So we realize the wisdom in Zoom. I am of the opinion that we will never go back from not using Zoom or something like this ever. The convenience has been proven to itself. And but at the same time, we don't want to negate this human contact and human warmth. So that's what we're looking at for our meetings. So second Tuesday of the month, the next month it's going to be online via Zoom, and we welcome all of you to attend, because like Phil said, we have 8 to 10. But when we have 8, I'd rather have 18. And if we have 18, I'd rather have 80. And if we have 80, I'd rather have 800. So this is how we all should grow, hopefully. But it would be wonderful if we can connect to individuals and communities. So thank you so much for the question. And someone's from Huntington Beach. Yeah. So, hey, Zoom is going to be the thing for you. Thank you, sir. You've been contributing a lot on the chat. So thank you so much for contributing that. I see a hand from Esther.
I have a question. Politics seems to, our politicians, I should say, seem to favor like the fossil fuels, etc. I even had a brother who we were discussing the areas like in Alaska that had been, set aside not to have, like the gas lines and that kind of stuff happen. And I was saying to him that, we need to preserve that area. And his attitude was, nah, we need the land, we need the oil, we need that stuff. And I've got Republican friends who they'll give you an entirely different viewpoint of why we shouldn't have EVs. We didn't look into it far enough, and it's going to cause this and that and everything else. How do we address this to them so that they see our point of view too?
Well, I'll take it first, and then I'll pass it to Phil. That we know that the fossil fuel industry is a political group itself. They have our politicians in their pockets, and they line their pockets because they contribute to their campaigns, and they really parrot whatever it is to keep their industry alive. It's all about money. Really, they don't mind that they drill and the drilling leaks into water tables and things like that. We'll fix it, just don't stop our income, is their approach. Now, when you're talking to your friends are not fossil fuel giants. You know, they're regular people like us. But the problem is they're getting fed bad science on the issue. And that science is something a lot of people just want to hear, the bad science. They want to hear it. They want an excuse to continue doing what they're doing, and this bad science fills that gap for them. But we have real science with real scientists who all come together and say that we are in a crisis and we're going the wrong direction in this crisis, and they are denying it. I wish that this issue was not polarized by politics, because we're all suffering from it. And we noticed one thing that I guess many people noticed, but we didn't keep it in our registry, that during COVID in its height, as bad as COVID was, and, you know, prayers up for everyone who lost their lives during COVID, but our air cleaned up. Did you guys see that report? Our air cleaned up immediately during COVID. Not immediately, but over time. No one was flying, no one was driving, trucks were stopped, everything was stopped, and the earth started to heal itself. But we can get into an area where a reversal is not an option. We cannot survive, and we have to, it's just a losing game. And we're at this point, proven by COVID, that we can change direction. We can do it now. And that is what I usually present to people who are saying that the climate crisis is not real. That event during COVID shows us that it's real, and we can make a change now, and it is not too late. Phil?
Yeah, I have no really good points. I mean, I don't think there's a silver bullet exactly on this. It's really difficult. My father-in-law is a climate denier, and I just don't talk to him about it. And every so often he'll sort of bring up some, you know, really climate change is a hoax. You know that, right? Because he knows I'm a climate activist. So he just likes to get these little digs in there. But I think two things. One is maybe just make an assessment of the person. If they're a dyed-in-the-wool, you know, climate denier, I wouldn't talk to them much about it. Honestly, I don't know how far you'd get with them. But if there's somebody that's kind of on the fence, they don't know, they've heard some things, but they're willing to listen. And you're willing to listen to them. And I think that's important. Even if they're saying stuff that's kind of pretty out there, listening with respect is really important. That does mean something to people. And then the second thing I was going to say is, you know, I think of kind of faith communities and where they can do if they have a real divide between sort of, you know, well, Democrat and Republican, or environmentalist and an oil lobby person, whatever. Gardening is a non-political activity. Everybody gardens, and it gets you in touch with nature, you know. And so I kind of think if you have a garden, a church, a faith community garden, or you come together to garden, that might be one way to sort of heal some of that stuff. Because I think the earth itself, Yusef talked about how the earth heals itself. Absolutely right. The earth also heals us. We're broken. This political divide is a sign of brokenness, and we need a lot of healing. So I think there's healing in gardening as well. I need to take my own advice and get out there and do some of the weeding, but and
Well,
I like. Oh, go ahead. Yeah,
I'd like to add one more thing before we go to Manek. Is that I was at talking with a politician about, you know, drilling and things like that. SD 350 was there. They invited me to talk to this politician, and we told him about all the hazards of drilling off coast, you know, and how the oil leaks and the oil spills are hazardous. We don't need to drill off of the coast of California. And we laid out all of our talking points, and they were wonderful. I think that presentation that day was absolutely wonderful. And you know what he said after all of that beautiful talk? He said, well, I only have one thing to say. Drill, baby, drill. And we were like, we did so well. We put out all this stuff, and he was just like dead set. So to Phil's point, if they're a hardliner, they're not going to change their attitude. And it felt kind of disrespectful, but he did it in a very respectful way by letting us finish, listening to us, all the beautiful points. And he finished with, I only have one thing to say, drill, baby, drill. So with that, I thought to leave you with that little anecdote, and then I'll go to Manette. Hopefully I pronounced your name right. There you
Yeah,
go.
hi. Thank you
Hi.
very much for all the good, information and the good suggestions, what we should do, because everything, if we want to bring change, like some people, philosophers have said, the change begins with ourselves, as an individual. It takes time for others to catch on, but by doing ourselves, like our parents, if they set a good example in our home, the children will learn the good values, and all that kind of thing. So I myself practice most of the items that you had suggested, about saving electricity, this, that, etc. And one thing, I live in an active senior community in Huntington Beach, and we have a main lounge, where I go to watch TV and all, and we socialize with people. So one time we were discussing, about the slogan, "Make America Great Again." Who said that? I didn't want to mention the name, but so there was one. So I suggested, that maybe we should have the slogan "Make Earth Great Again." And so what happened? There was one lady sitting with us, and she says, "My daughter makes these hats, caps or hats that people can wear." And she says, I'll tell her to make one with that inscribed on it, "Make Earth Great Again." So, and she gave it to us. She didn't even ask us for money, even though I offered. And she gave one to me and one to another gentleman. So I used to wear that cap or hat whenever I walked. I walked quite a few places, and there were a lot of people. You get a response from them. Some of them would say, "Well, no, Manek, it should be Make America Great Again," like, people who are certain followers. But a lot of young people, they stop and ask me, and so that starts a conversation, and young people are much more oriented towards, earth and water and, saving all those kind of things. And so that was a great, until I lost that cab, when I used to go by bus instead of driving as much as possible. And one time I was waiting at a bus stop, and the wind blew it, and the bus came, and so I didn't want to lose my bus. So I just climbed aboard, and later realized that my cab was gone. But I think we should do whatever we can, the best we can, and talk to others. And even in our board meetings of our homeowner association, I pointed out that sometimes the air conditioning is going on in the main lounge, a big room, when hardly anyone is there, after the events are done during the day, and when it is cool outside, so they basically agreed with me and told the guards or whoever to check time to time and put the temperature to like 75 or 78 or something. And so we can do a lot of things, recycle this, that. But thank you again for your good information.
Thank you for being here, and thank you for coming all that way to our Zoom from Huntington Beach. Thank you. I see another hand there, Lois.
I just want to say that 7 of us here tonight are from the La Mesa First United Methodist Church. We're part of a women's Bible study group, and right now we're studying a book on Christianity and the world religions. And so it coincided the timing with our Bible study, but I'm also on an Earth Care Ministry group that we have in our church. Phil has spoken to us before, and right now we're trying to understand the different religions and understand, more in depth than what we were tonight. You were focusing on the earth, and certainly that's a big one that we can all share in our concerns over. But I think even at a lower depth, we'd like to understand about what the other religions believe and how it does affect our walk with God. So I just wanted you to know who we are and what we are dealing with. But it certainly is very strong. I did want to say that you may know that the United Methodist Church is going through some transition time as far as different positions of the view on the theology and the Bible. And one of the changes with the United Methodist Women has to take out the name Methodist, and we are now the United Women in Faith. And so it's not only Methodist, it's not only Christian, it's the faith walk that we want everyone to do. So just to let you know who we are.
Thank you so much for being here. Go ahead, Phil.
Oh, I was just going to say, yeah, thank you, Lois, for sharing that. And it's interesting, how these things change. I mean, religion also changes. There's things evolve, and how we understand it changes. And I just think that all this sort of cross-pollination that's happening is a good thing. And so that's really interesting what's happening with the women's group. I think that's fascinating, and that is how change happens. And I like Manuk's story too, with the hat. It's, simple gestures are really important. All these, my belief is there is no act too small. All acts have a significance. They really do. And especially if they come out of the heart, which it sounds like that one did. And the fact of the Bible study coming to this forum as well. All these acts are important, and don't undersell that. I think, it's a huge problem, but it will be solved. Yusef basically talked about this. It will be solved by a whole bunch of small decisions that we make as human beings.
Any other questions anyone may have?
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you
Thanks,
all for
everyone.
coming.
And
Thank you.
just so everyone knows, this has been recorded, and they'll be sending me a YouTube that I will put on the World Interfaith Network archive, so that you will be able to play this back over and over and over again with all your friends. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Good night.
Thanks, everyone.